Welcome back to the channel today, everyone. We're going to be doing a complete set presentation. I am 1 month behind on these, but I am pleased to present one of the more interesting sets from the 1980s, 1985 tops. This will be the complete set of card number 1 all the way through 792 for a season that featured several key rookies, some notable Hall of Fame inductions, but most importantly, Pete Rose set the all-time hit record, and we had the first and only World Series that featured 2 teams from Missouri. So let's go ahead and get started. Here it is, starting with the 1985 set. It starts off with the record breaker cards. This is one of several subsets that are within there. The most important subset would probably be the one that people remember having the key rookie card of Mark McGwire, which will be the USA team, which we'll get to at some point. The card design is fairly basic, but also fairly popular for this particular era. In my mind, it was one of the better card designs and one of the more coveted sets from my childhood because we were often chasing the key rookie cards of Mark McGwire, Roger Clemens, Kirby Puckett, Eric Davis, and Orel Hershiser. Of that group, only one at this point is actually in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. The tops was released in a series of wax packs, cello packs, rack packs, vending packs, complete set, and also had a Tiffany release too that became subsequent popular as the years have gone by. All right, so this is kind of fun. So it starts off featuring records that were set during the 84 season. And I'll point out the stars and Hall of Famers as we kind of go through it. And we start off with quite a few of them right at the beginning. We have Carlton Fisk, Hall of Famer, Steve Garvey, former MVP, Dwight Gooden, who was, I believe, the Cy Young Award winner during that particular season. And I believe also, not Rookie of the Year, that was the previous year, I think, for him. But he was the Cy Young Award winner, featured here in a record breaker card in 85. We also have Joe Morgan on there for most home runs career for second baseman. Pete Rose, most singles lifetime, obviously broke the hit record during this season. Nolan Ryan, who had the most strikeouts lifetime at this point. And we also have Bruce Sutter down here, who had the most saves in a season during the National League, of which has actually been broken several times since thereafter. And finally, we have Don Sutton featured here of the most seasons with 100 or more strikeouts. I believe also a record that has fallen since then. The design is very popular. I love these great little banners here and the color combination typically with the uniforms for most of these players. Sometimes it contrasts their uniforms quite nicely, as you'll see in some of the cards here, such as, for example, the Philadelphia Phillies card here. But this features all the great uniforms from the 80s, where you have those big, bright, colorful, usually pullover type jerseys, and has a lot of different piping along the pants for most of these, and also the sleeves for most of these uniforms at this time. All right, so we got Mike Scott, who was actually a really good pitcher during this time, is one of the first cards I want to point out, along with Jerry Koosman on there. Very good pitchers during their era. But Saberhagen was also a guy that we really chased after at this time. I believe his rookie was in 84, if I'm not mistaken. But he was at the top of his game here, and he was featured on the World Series winning team, the Kansas City Royals, when they won their first World Series. In 1985, when they won it in 7 games over the St. Louis Cardinals. A series probably, in hindsight, probably most remembered for an error made by the umpire, a missed call at first base, which at the advent of replay, it allowed us to be able to see something that on the field may or may not have been obvious to everybody, but they allowed somebody to be, I believe at this time it was maybe called out at first, who actually was safe, or vice versa, but actually allowed a rally to continue that allowed Kansas City to be able to win Game 6 and went on to win Game 7. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the home teams won all of these games. So that was kind of an interesting feature of this World Series as it went 7 games in 85. I remember it pretty well in my household. It was one of the first World Series I watched some games of, with my dad being a huge St. Louis Cardinal fan, so I did watch it. The other playoff teams for this particular time were the Toronto Blue Jays, featured here of Jesse Barfield, and the Los Angeles Dodgers. So I don't see a Dodger card feature here just yet. Good old Cal Ripken, one of my favorite cards from that era. Bill Niekro. Niekro had his 300th win, actually, on October 6th during 1985. He was the second pitcher to reach 300 wins that season, Tom Seaver being the first on August 4th, which was also the same day that Rod Carew reached 3,000 hits. Interesting milestones reached by 2 different players on the same day that are both in the Hall of Fame. Stuff turns 40 years old this year. Little Bill Buckner up here. Rick Suffolk, Don Baylor. Keith Hernandez. I believe this is a card that's featured on the top of the wax box for these. You can still find them at a decent price. Goose Gossage with the Padres here. George Brett from the World Series winning Kansas City Royals. Ricky Henderson, great looking card of his here. Still with Oakland, last season with Oakland. Or at least last card with Oakland. He might have actually been a Yankee by this point. Here's the first little subset, right after the Al Oliver card here. Forgot he played with Philadelphia. But we have the father-son duo. So it's kind of an interesting little subset that they had in the set. So you see players that are current that had fathers that were Major League parents. Here we got the Bells right there. Got the Berras. There's Yogi, pictured with his son. The Boones, this is obviously the grandfather and the father of Aaron Boone and Brett Boone. Franconas right there. Kennedys. Jeff Kunkel and his father, Bill. The Laws, Vern Law, Vance Law, Dick Schofield. Joel Skinner's father was Bob Skinner. The Smalleys, Richard here. Mike Steinhaus, doing a picture with the Senators there. The Trouts, we got Dizzy Trout and his son Steve, and the Virgils. We got Osi and Ozzy. Ron Gardenhire was a manager for many years with the Minnesota Twins. Alvin Davis was also a card we kind of chased for a little bit at this time. Had a really good rookie season. We got Jim Rice. Yogi Berra. Yeah, here's the Hall of Fame manager. Let's talk a little bit about the Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame inductees, there actually was 4 during this season. Some names that are fairly notable. Starting off with Lou Brock, who at that time was the all-time stolen base leader. Enos Slaughter, played those many years mostly with the St. Louis Cardinals. Archie Vaughn of the Pirates, and Hoyt Wilhelm, who played everywhere, including with my Chicago White Sox. Dusty Baker, I think future Hall of Fame manager here. Dennis Eckersley. Power hitter George Foster towards the end of his career. Dave Parker with the Reds. Tommy John, Dave Winfield. Here's the Roger Clemens rookie card. Good old Hojo up here. He's still at Detroit. Forgot that he started there. Jimmy Key with Toronto. Rusty Staub. Reggie. Beautiful looking Reggie card, I think, personally. It's a fun one. These are just beautiful design cards. One of my favorite sets from the 80s by far. Gary Carter with the Expos, right before he came over to the Mets. Helped them win a World Series the next year. Harold Baines, one of my guys. Good David Getty, reliever there. Little Chuck Tanner down here, Dan Quisenberry. Frank Viola, Cy Young Award winner. Here we got another insert set. I don't think they've done something like this before, where they had the #1 draft picks and some guys that are still active players at the time. And they kind of went as far back as 68 and kind of went all the way up to present. You see some good stars in here and also some Hall of Famers you kind of go through here. These cards within themselves are not all that valuable, but they're just kind of interesting seeing guys that were #1 draft picks that went on to actually have Major League Baseball careers. 2 that stand out to me the most on this first page would be Darryl Strawberry and Harold Baines. But Bob Horner could really ball too. And on the second page, I got little Sean Dunston, played many years here over with the Chicago Cubs. Joe Nico, just featured him recently in the 67 set. Rod Carew, nearing the end of his career. I think for the most part, my cards have really good borders. Not all of them are centered, which you can expect from this era. Got Sparky Anderson here. Nice looking card. Ted Simmons, Hall of Famer there. Bochy, will soon be a Hall of Fame manager. How can you not with 4 World Series victories as a manager? You gotta do something wrong if you don't get in the Hall of Fame. Dick Hauser, unfortunately passed away while he was an active manager. Not this season in particular, obviously. Robin Yount, down there. Good old Bill Russell near the end of his career. Still with the Dodgers. Beautiful Wade Boggs card. That one's pretty stunning. Joe Morgan, his last card as a player. Burt Bryleven. Steve Carlton, nice sharp looking card from that era. Suter, towards the end of his career. Got a bit of a diamond cut there, notice that. Ken Griffey Sr. All right, cool. Before we jump into the USA set, which I'm sure you're looking at right now, just wanted to point out some other things. There was actually a 2-day strike that occurred during this season. It lasted just on the 6th and 7th of August, but it just kind of like it was a precursor for things that were to come later, 7 years later when there was 9 years later when it was complete work stoppage. This was the first year where they had a 7-game league championship series. And before that, it was a 5-game league championship series. So that was something that, again, started making the playoffs a little bit longer and longer. So those are some things that kind of note that happened during the season. With my next pause, I'll kind of go through like some of the guys that won the major awards and some of your league leaders of note. So here we go. Here's the USA team. This was the first time they ever did a insert team to kind of commemorate the United States team, which I think at this time was playing in the Pan Am Games, I think. It was not even the Olympics. But the ones that are probably of note on here, they've got a few guys that did go on to play in the major leagues. I believe Bankhead did, if I'm not mistaken. So did Dunn. Other ones, I think Mac had a cup of coffee for a little while. Marzano, I believe it did as well. Odubie McDowell did for sure. Mark McGwire, obviously the most popular of that bunch. Corey Snyder, and also I think Billy Swift pitched for a little while too. But clearly the McGwire was the most popular card of the bunch. Mine's nowhere near center on here, but it's still kind of a fun copy. You can get a copy that's pretty affordable in an 8. Even a 9 is not going to set you back too much if you really desperately want that card. Obviously McGwire is kind of infamous and also super popular for breaking certain home run records and then later being accused of and later admitting to using substances during the time that he sets the single season home run record. But there he is. That was his first card that we all wanted as a kid. I had a copy for a long time, sold it, and later got it when I was acquiring the set. And that's been my copy since that time. So I've had the same one for about 25 years. Bobby Cox here, still with the Blue Jays. Dawson, remember the Expos. Joe Torre. Still funny seeing him managing anybody but the Yankees in my mind. Go Fernando Valenzuela, big pitcher of that era. Go Ryan Sandberg, passed away recently, unfortunately, right before the National. Tony La Russa. Actually have this card autographed as well. Steve Sachs was a pretty solid player during this time period. Sweet Lou Whitaker over here. Great ball player in my opinion. Larry Bowa was a big part of the Cubs team. Went to the playoffs in '84. And there's Hershiser. All right, that's a good place for us maybe to kind of stop and look at some of the award winners. Our Cy Young Award winners for this season, we already looked at one of them. That was Brett Saberhagen. Dwight Gooden also won the Cy Young Award. So we saw him on a record breaker card. I don't think I've seen his regular card just yet. Your MVPs were Willie McGee, which I don't think we've seen just yet, and Don Mattingly, which I know we haven't seen yet. Our managers of the year were Bobby Cox, who we just saw, and also Whitey Herzog, which I don't think we've come across just yet. And our rookies of the year are Vince Coleman and Ozzie Guillen of my Chicago White Sox, who's not part of this set, but is part of the traded set. I think the same is true for Vince Coleman as well. Mike Schmidt, excuse me, Lee Smith, Paul Maltor, and these cards take me back to a time where baseball was just plain fun for me because I was still playing it, collecting it, watching it, and have all the time in the world during the summer months to be able to watch it and follow it because we were out of school playing baseball quite often. We got Pete Rose as a manager. I think this is his first manager card. Good old Bill Matlock there, former batting champ. Kirk Gibson, World Series hero a few seasons later. Also had a pretty good World Series in '84 as well, actually. Got Darryl Strawberry up here. Pedro Guerrero, good players during this time frame. Terry Francona as a player. Probably be a Hall of Fame manager. Good old Dwight Evans. Pete Rose, the player, featured there. There's a fun card to have. Tommy Lasorda. Ozzie Smith, the Wizard of Oz. That's actually a really good copy of that card, honestly. Jack Morris. Dwight Gooden. A fun card. For those of us who couldn't have the '84 Topps Traded card, that was our rookie. Tim Raines. There's Eric Davis card. Pretty popular item. Good old Damaso Garcia. That was a fun name always to say as a kid. Okay. Tony Gwynn. We're into the 500s now. Let me stop just for a minute and talk to you. Speaking of Tony Gwynn, he didn't win the batting average, but it made me think of the guys who did. We had Willie McGee, who was our batting average champion for that year, and Wade Boggs in the American League. Home run champions were, I believe, Darrell Evans and Dale Murphy at that time. RBI leaders were Mattingly and Dave Parker. Wins leader were Gooden and Guidry. ERA leaders were Dave Stieb and Gooden. And strikeout leaders were Bryleven and Gooden. This was when Gooden was at the height of his powers. We got Don Mattingly featured down here. And boy, could he throw. Tom Seaver, Tony Perez, Herzog, Trammell, old George Carter, Eddie Murray. This is always, I thought was funny when I put the set together, where you have his base card followed by his all-star card. We start the all-stars kind of back to back here. So I'll print out the Hall of Famers starting with Eddie Murray. We have Brett, funny with his hat off, Cal Ripken, Dave Winfield, Ricky Henderson. And we have Sandberg, Schmidt, Ozzie Smith. He might get in on the Veterans Committee this year. Dale Murphy, Tony Gwynn, Gary Carter, and Bruce Sutter. Round out our Hall of Famers that were the All-Star cards. You get near the end here, up in the 700s after that. We got Sutton with Milwaukee. Frank White, another great second baseman of this era. Raleigh Fingers. There's our Willie McGee card, our MVP. Nolan Ryan. Towards the end of the set here. Good old Willie Randolph. Carlton Fisk. Great looking card of his in the catcher gear. Prowling home plate, waiting for that pit throw home. obviously with the beautiful yellow banisters, if you will, or railing that we had in the box seats. Good old Comiskey Park. There's our final couple pages. Got good old Mookie Wilson up there, and our final page does feature Ron Guidry on there, who was our wins leader for that particular season. So that's it. That's the 1985 set. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll be back in another month's time with, I think, the last set I have from the 80s that we have not covered, which I believe is 1989. Have a good day and the rest of your week.